Hi, everyone. Today I wanted to share a little bit of information regarding introductions and conclusions. It's a very brief overview of how to get started. So I'm going to turn off my video and show you the slides. So what are the main components of an introduction? The first primary component is to gain attention, and I'll talk a little bit more about the details involved in gaining attention. One thing to keep in mind is in order to actually get people to listen, if you don't have their attention, you're definitely not going to have an engaged audience. The second important component of the introduction is to reveal the topic. As you use that attention getter, you should actually engage in an attention getter that links to the topic so your audience has an idea of what to expect. And thirdly, and most importantly, especially for our assignment, is establishing credibility. Credibility is determined by the audience. So in order for your audience to view you as credible, you have to give them information that lets them know why you're an expert on the subject. If you're talking about a subject matter that you've participated in for years, or that you've researched recently, or that you are an expert in, that lets your audience know why they should listen to you. And then finally, it's really important to take your thesis statement and to use that as a single statement that encompasses the key ideas of your presentation. In this case, we're previewing or forecasting what the audience expects to hear. So not only have you gotten their attention, you've also revealed the topic, you've established why you're credible on the topic, and you give them an overview of what they can expect to hear in the presentation. Now let's look more specifically at ways to get attention. The first option is to use a quote. If there's a famous quote that relates to your speech or your topic in particular, it's always nice to use a quote. Another option is to tell a story. Now, we only have a short time to give our assignment, so this might not be the best option, but people do listen to personal stories. So if you have a personal story that introduces your topic in a unique way, maybe that would be a way to start your presentation. Posing a question is a very common way to get things started. It's using a rhetorical question. We hear this quite often. And for this assignment, it might be a way for you to get started, just a comfortable way to lead your audience to think more about the subject matter. Now, you might have data or a startling statistic that actually gets people's attention. So let's say you're teaching on a particular task or a process that is important for most people, and let's say the majority of people don't know how to use this technique properly. Maybe that type of statistic or data would be interesting for them. And finally, one way that you can establish attention is by creating common ground. What do you and the audience members have in common? It could be that you're both interested in improving on a particular skill, or you find that a certain technique or a process is something that's interesting. So if you resonate with the demographic you're trying to reach and you feel like you can establish common ground, that's a great way to get things started. Now, there are really just two primary functions of a conclusion. The first is summarizing your main points. In this assignment in particular, where you're explaining a process, you're going to have a number of key steps in that process. You want to make sure at the end of your presentation that you summarize those key points so that your audience knows just what it is that they need to accomplish. You also want to provide closing thought. There's a tendency to want to just stop the message once you've gotten through the main points. You can either revert back to a technique that you used in gaining attention in the beginning of the talk, or you can come up with a new closing thought. But you want to make sure that this closing thought links to something that you talked about that relates to your topic. So the last thing they're thinking about is your presentation. So what are the overall basic mechanics of beginning and ending? Make sure your intro and conclusion do the following. They should be no longer than 10% of your total speech. By that I mean that the introduction should take no longer than 10% of the time allotted, and the conclusion should take no longer than 10% of the time allotted. Make sure in that introduction you include an attention getter that reveals the topic, your credibility on the topic, and a preview, which is a single statement that encompasses the key ideas, kind of like the thesis of your speech. Finally, in that summary and closing thought, you'll provide a wrap-up that allows your audience to know what it is that you've talked about today and how they can remember the key points. If you'd like to learn more about the intricate opportunities that different factors of attention offer in intros, or specific ways that you can gain ways of closure and conclusions, take some looks at examples in the text, observe other speakers on educational YouTube channels to see how they include all 4 components of an intro and a conclusion.